Peter Scully, the worst human that ever existed on the dark web. Until his arrest in 2015, Peter Scully sold videos of himself torturing and sexually abusing young girls on his dark web site, No Limits Fun. With a family and a home in the Melbourne suburbs, Peter appeared to be an average Australian man. However, in 2011, he fled to the Philippines to escape a multi-million-dollar fraud. But that was just the tip of the iceberg of his crimes. In Manila, Peter established a massive child pornography and torture porn empire on the dark web. He told desperate families that he would provide food and education to their children, but instead he subjected them to torture and sexual abuse, which he filmed and sold to make himself rich. Fortunately, his terror came to an end when he was arrested after an international search in 2015. Even though he was sentenced to life in 2018 and further 129 years in 2022, prosecutors had asked that the Philippines reinstate the death penalty just for him. This is the disturbing true story of Peter Scully, the world's worst pedophile. Peter Scully was born January 1963 in Melbourne, Australia. For a long time he lived an outwardly normal life, and you could never imagine what would become of him in later years. Scully was married, had 2 children, and he lived with his family in a suburb of Melbourne. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. He left his family and moved away from them. Scully had dove into a life of crime. He developed a property scheme that defrauded 20 investors of more than $2.68 million. He got a teenage girlfriend that he prostituted out to sex parties. As a result, Scully became the focus of Australian authorities in 2009. So he then fled the country 2 years later to Cagayan de Oro, on the island of Mindanao in the Philippines. From the Philippines, Peter Scully started an international pedophile ring based on videos of children being sexually abused and tortured. He would live stream these on the dark web for paying customers through his production company, No Limits Fun. In the Philippines, Scully preyed on the vulnerable. He found young victims by promising their parents that he could help their children by offering food and education. He also had 2 Filipina accomplices, Carme Ann Alvarez and Lizil Margallo, who helped him find victims. Both women appeared in Scully's deeply disturbing videos. The videos and live streams that Scully made was terrifying. Videos of rape and torture, involving children as young as 18 months old. His most infamous video was called Daisy's Destruction. It was reportedly so disturbing that many investigators believed it was just a myth. Unfortunately, it was not. In at least one case, Peter Scully reportedly strangled an 11-year-old and buried her body under his house. But the most disturbing of all was that Scully had many customers, and people on the would pay as much as $10,000 per view. Meanwhile, another Australian pedophile, 22-year-old Matthew David Graham, better known as Lux, was drawn in by Scully's violent videos. Lux operated Hurt to the Core, one of the dark web's most notorious sites. There, thousands of people shared abusive content, much of it featuring young children. This content is known as Hurtcore, a form of pornography that features non-simulated pain and torture. It's no wonder that law enforcement around the world considered Lux one of the world's worst online pedophiles. That is, before Scully, of course. Lux took one of Peter Scully's most notorious videos and put it on his site, amplifying its audience. Law enforcement quickly took note of the disturbing video, and because it seemed to include someone speaking a few words in Dutch, it drew the attention of the Dutch police. Although later on, it was determined that the person in the video was not speaking Dutch and simply just had a strong Australian accent. But the Dutch police had collected so much evidence against this person that they remained on the case until Scully's arrest in 2015, turning the case against him into an international one. By the time Peter Scully was arrested, Lux had been caught too. Lux was sentenced to 15 years in prison after a judge described his crimes as pure evil. Scully too would face consequences, but not before a suspicious fire complicated efforts to convict him. A fire started in the evidence room that contained Scully's films. The destroyed evidence included hardware, memory cards, a camera, and a chain that was allegedly used by Scully during the abuse he was on trial for. But the case against him was strong enough without that evidence. Ruby Malinog, one of the lawyers prosecuting Peter Scully, said the videos were the most devastating thing she'd ever seen. "I cried when I was watching them," she said. "In fact, I feel like crying just now while talking about it." Although Scully claimed to be remorseful, he didn't seem like it. By pleading not guilty, Scully forced at least 10 of his victims to testify and relive their hellish experiences. He also likely continued to operate his dark web empire, exchanging phone calls and texts with his accomplice Margallo before she was finally arrested. Scully was sentenced to life in June 2018 and an additional 129 years in 2022, but the Philippines still remains a hub for child abuse and exploitation. Detective Paul Hopkins, who worked on the Scully case, describes the network of child abuse there as monstrous. As it turned out, Peter Scully was just one piece of the puzzle.